Welcome to the Uncensored Self Podcast. I am your host, Ryan Gillen, and this is a space where women who value achievement, success, accomplishment, and wealth, but also crave happiness, love, joy, and deep fulfillment come to remember that we get to have both. Not by doing more, but by being more of who we truly are. In this show, we explore identity, energy, alignment, and embodiment because you didn't come here to follow someone else's rules. You came to right your own. Let's dive in. Hey guys, welcome back to the Uncensored Self Podcast, where I'm excited to have a really fun and unique conversation with a new friend of mine. So I'm going to introduce you to my friend Ryan here in just a minute. But I always like to share when I have guests on the show is kind of the story behind how we connected. So Ryan and I actually connected on TikTok. He followed me and he just reached out one day and was like, hey, are you ever looking, for podcast guests? And I was really honest. I was like, I don't do a lot of podcast guests, but if you have an angle or an idea, like I'm down for whatever, because this work for me is more than just, is it production friendly? Does it, fit into the box? It's like, let's just have real conversations about life and our emotions and our relationships and all that crazy shit. So Ryan and I had a lot of fun getting to know one another. And I thought he's going to bring a really unique perspective to the show in regards to like the hard work and the success story from a man's perspective for sure. But then also we're going to talk about like masculine and feminine energy and how that shows up again from a man's perspective. So I'm just really excited. Ryan, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me. I'm very excited to be here, and I'm really glad that we were able to connect. And it's gonna be a fun conversation.
It is. So why don't you start with just give us a couple minutes of like the highlights of your story, your journey, and then we'll kind of hop into the good stuff. But give us like I told Ryan before I hit record, I was like, I never read people's bios because I've been the person when somebody's reading my bio and I'm staring at them and it's the most uncomfortable thing on the planet, one. And two, it's just almost so much more interesting to hear it out of your mouth. So tell us about you.
Yeah. So my name is Ryan Thompson, and I am a founder of a company that focuses on digital services, but that's really not where my story is focused today.
Sure.
I grew up in a very unstable single mother, did her best kind of household, trailer park to trailer park kind of situation. And after her untimely passing when I was a child, I entered, with my father, who was not a very good person. That's kind of where the story begins is with that trauma and the experiences that I had to experience then. And so moving in and kind of going through my life, with my young adult years, I sat a lot in my masculine energy. I felt like I always had to achieve, succeed. I wasn't allowed to fail because I had to prove everyone wrong. I had to do better. I had to show my mom that she had someone to be proud of, even though, she wasn't physically with us anymore. And so through all of that, I had to go to therapy, and I had to,
I want to just put some you didn't have to go to therapy, and
You're right. I did it.
You chose to go to therapy, and I think that's fucking amazing. But that's important because to you, it was like, I had to. This is not who I'm going to be. And so for you, it probably felt like I had to, Ryan, but like a lot of people don't. And I just want to point that out to you, that you made the choice
You're
to
right.
not let your trauma be your story.
I did. And for so long, it was victim mentality. It was this happened to me. This feels sad for me. I mean, the number of people in my young adult years I would trauma dump on, it was just, it's kind of, it's silly to think about now, but, so choosing to go to therapy and choosing to work on myself, actually started because, and we'll get into that in a minute.
Yeah.
Because I was around a lot of masculine energy in college. I had joined a fraternity, and there's a whole reason behind that. And so being around all of that, I had to really think about like, why am I doing these things? Why am I behaving this way? And so really my journey is one of personal growth, of healing, of messing up a million times before I quote, get it right, if that's even a thing.
No.
And so, and then I also studied psychology academically in undergrad too. So that just added a whole nother layer. I think I've always been on a journey.
What does that feel like? Like knowing you have your own trauma, but then like understanding it? Like, was that mind bendy or what?
I think for my first few years in therapy, we had to unpack a lot of that with my therapist, because I started to intellectualize a lot of my healing and my journey and what that meant. And so I think I was doing that in college. I wanted to understand why. I think the core question I was interested in answering for myself was, how could somebody treat me this way? How could this happen? Why do people act the way they do? And I wanted to understand why that was the case, so that I could, not continue to blame myself for other people's behaviors.
Sure. That's interesting. When you say, and I want to, the reason you pull out the word intellectualize, and I think it's also just fascinating that you went on this journey in like your early adulthood. Cause I mean, I was 34 before I was like, something's not right here. So
Yeah.
like kudos to you for knowing that when you were 20 years old. But when you mean intellectualize, and I'm asking this question specifically because I think as smart people we do this, but like, what do you mean by intellectualize your journey?
So in therapy, it would often sound like things of I am this way because of X, Y, and Z, and
Mhm.
so I have a right to be this way. And so it kind of like when I was first kind of starting to heal, a lot of phrases, and it's an interesting phrase because a lot of people say it today. I would protect my peace a lot.
Oh yeah.
And that can be weaponized very easily if you're not
Yeah.
careful. And so I was doing that a lot at the time. And so intellectualizing in therapy is really just this idea of like, I know why I'm doing this, I understand why I'm doing this, but I can't seem to stop doing this.
Yes.
And the real work is in the retraining of your nervous system. It's in the quiet moments between therapy. Therapy is just a way to guide you. It is
Totally.
not the work. The work is when you leave therapy and you get home and you get
Yes.
frustrated. It is
Yes.
when you get sad later that night, when you have a great day followed by a not so great day. That's when the real therapy begins.
Yeah, no, I think that's really great. And I think we do that, especially, Ryan, who listens to the show, we talked about it. We're dealing with highly successful, very capable people, professionals, where most of us understand the concepts we talk about on the show, right? Most of us understand trauma. Most of us understand, but like exactly like you said, don't change. But we use the understanding, and I'm going to say something that's going to trigger the fuck out of some people, as an excuse to protect my peace by avoiding people that piss me off instead of dealing with my own shit.
Yes,
That's what I heard you just
exactly.
say.
Yeah, I mean, really a lot. It's one thing to I would say to honor your peace versus
Amen.
protect your peace. I think those are
Right.
two different things. Honoring your peace looks like boundaries of, I am not going to engage with this. I
Right.
am not responding to that. I will not
Right.
continue to reach out to this person. That's a
Right.
boundary with yourself. That is
Bingo.
truly honoring your peace. Protecting your peace is, you upset me, so I'm telling you you're cut off. That's protecting your peace. And that's actually an ego move because
Yeah.
your ego's job is to protect you.
But it's also like you just described masculine and feminine energy, right?
I
To
did.
honor something is feminine energy, right? To honor somebody's beauty, somebody's grace, somebody's whatever versus protect. Protect and provide is traditionally masculine energy. Even, most of the women listening to this show, we tend to operate a little more in our masculine than we do in our feminine, which is why I'm so excited about having this conversation with you. But, we do think that it's like, I have to protect my peace. I have to protect my family. I have to protect. And like you said, that winds up putting up a barrier instead of honoring, which is an internal thing, right? I'm honoring, let's use this as an example of like, I honor other people's opinions, right? Like you can have your opinion. I don't have to protect myself from your opinion because it's different than mine, but I also can honor it without sharing it.
Yes, exactly.
I can say, hey, Ryan, I don't agree with that, but I do agree with your right to have that opinion that is different than mine. To me, that is an honor versus your opinion is different than mine. That's dangerous. Fuck you. Get out. I never want to talk to you again.
Yeah, very different.
Masculine, and again, it tends to be masculine and feminine energy. So I want to talk about, because you said that the fraternity, and I know a little bit of your career story, right? Entrepreneurship, job, entrepreneurship, different things. Like all of us have that version of the story. But what was the hard work message? What was the success message for a man in Texas, in a fraternity? Like what did success look like? What were you told? Like, this is the path, Ryan, and if you just do this, you'll live happily ever after. Or did they not teach you guys happily ever after? Was
They
that just a princess thing? Did we just get that because we were girls?
I think for me it really starts, as a kid growing up with a single mom. She did her best, absolutely, but she didn't know what masculine energy meant either.
No,
She was
no.
sitting a lot in her masculine energy herself as
Probably
a
wounded
woman,
masculine.
very wounded masculine energy, relationship after relationship, issue after issue, instability, couldn't keep
Yep.
jobs, things like that, right?
Yeah,
Learning from her, being kind of the only male in the house, and this happens
sure,
with a lot of single moms,
sure.
I became the man of the house. And so what does that mean? My job is to protect. My job is to be emotional support for my mom. My job is to, do good, go be successful and make the family name proud, to get us out of this situation. That responsibility is on me. And I think a lot of children, no matter male or female, experience that. But in this context, it was what was taught from the beginning was I remember the very first thing my mom noticed was I like to, draw like plans out. And it's because I have this like architectural builder energy, that it's my building energy, my creative energy. And she's just like, well, you should go be an architect,
Yeah.
And so for so long, I thought I wanted to be an architect
Yeah.
just because of that moment.
Right.
And it wasn't.
Yeah.
So I think as I got into college and, I had been through this trauma now and my masculine energy, I would say skyrocketed even more
Yeah.
so, like the unhealthy version of it, because now I have all this trauma on top of this way that I was taught that requires me to, you know, show up with, I'm going to get this done. I'll
Yep.
handle it myself.
Yep.
I have to take action. If I don't do it, no one else will. I'm the only
Yeah.
one that can help
Yeah.
me. And
Yep.
while it's true, you're the only one that can save yourself, it's not true that you're the only person in the world that can do the thing that you need to do, right?
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
And so entering college and being around, joining a fraternity, I wanted to understand more. What did masculine energy look like across the spectrum? So I thought, well, you know what? I'll just go be around a bunch of guys and experience what that was. And I'll tell you, I experienced both the healthy, the
Yeah.
unhealthy, and somewhere in between
Yeah.
because these are 20 something year old
Sure.
college kids, right? And they've got certain mindsets around things. Some of them come from different, walks of life, different
Right.
political backgrounds, different family dynamics. And so but we're all bonded by this idea of brotherhood and what that means. And so that's really where that part of that story begins.
That's so interesting. I wish, and again, I'm just fascinated by the fact that you were studying this when you were 18, not studying it maybe consciously, but aware. I was just not. And now I wish that I was because I'm like, oh, I can only, because again, I was an athlete, but rooms full of women and what that looked like for us. Right. But it doesn't sound different. Like hearing you talk about like, I'm the only one, it's got to be me, the doing, like it's very similar um, for us as women, at least the message that I heard. And again, I don't know if that's because I was raised an athlete or if that's traditional. I don't know. I don't necessarily know. So
Well,
let's go ahead.
I have a thought on that.
Yes, please.
I think that, masculine, we all have masculine and feminine energy. You talk about that, of course. I would say for men, it's expected. For women, it's required.
Mm,
And it's especially in today's society and the way that I know you've talked about being a previous feminist and what that
yeah.
meant for you and everything like that is the same masculine energy, right? And so for men, we have to be masculine because if we're not masculine,
Right.
what are we good for? Is basically the
Right.
message we get.
Yeah.
Whereas for women, it sounds like, the message is if you're not masculine and you don't do this yourself, you can't depend on a man. You can't
Yeah.
have him help you, all this stuff, right? And so it comes out in these different ways, but it's really the same underlying survival strategy for both genders.
Amen. Well, and isn't that true? We're taught don't depend on a man, but then we're also taught that we got to get one to fall in love with us. But
Right.
don't depend on him. But you got to
Well, we
dress
won't
a
get
certain.
into the entire double standard around women. That is a whole different conversation.
Let's talk about, so one of the things I want to continue this. Before we hit record, you had told me you were like, I was listening to the show, before today to just kind of prepare, and you had watched the episode or listened to the episode with Derek and I, and you had some really interesting thoughts on our masculine and feminine dynamic that I think would kind of like fuel this conversation. So do you want to share a little bit of like what you noticed or what you heard, and then we can go from there?
Yeah, so I definitely, see Derek is a quiet guy. He keeps to himself a lot. That comes out very clear. You carried a lot of that conversation, which, great for you.
Story of my life.
But when he was speaking and when he was
Yeah.
talking and you guys were sharing your
Yeah.
past and how you
Yeah.
met and what that looked like, what I heard a lot was, he always had access to this intuitive,
Yes.
supportive, feminine energy within him, but
Yeah.
maybe didn't have quite the permission that
Yeah.
he needed to do that or to express that. Whereas for you, it sounds like you sitting in that masculine energy for so long, you needed to feel safe. And when you
Yeah.
guys met, you were on your journey at the
Yeah.
time and then here he comes showing healthy masculine energy. And so for the first time, probably in your relationship history,
Right.
you're like,
Yeah.
hey, maybe it's okay for me to slow down. Maybe it's okay for me
Yeah.
to let somebody else kind of take the lead a little bit. I don't have to do it all the time. And so
So,
I heard that
yeah.
a lot in the
Yeah.
conversation.
Yeah.
But it wouldn't have been, I think, necessarily obvious unless you were somebody who has
Right.
studied and
Right.
gone on this journey.
And for most people, it just surprises them. Like, you saw the nuance of it, right? Like, "Oh, this is what's happening here." For most people, it just surprises them the way that I am with him. Like, I've shared on the show multiple times before, like, I'll say things and my mom's always just like, "You what? Like, you're gonna ask him what he thinks? Like, who are you?" Right?
But that's
And
actually the key.
yeah,
That's
totally.
actually the key to a man. And I'll say this, just within my
Yes.
relationship and
Yeah.
with my friends, that the key is as men, we have to feel safe. We have to create our own safety all the time,
Yes. Amen.
whether it's out on the street or in home. And if we're in toxic relationships, it's even worse. And so you deferring to him gives him that permission to go, I don't have to let myself kind of die
Yeah.
essentially
Yeah.
inside to express myself. I just have to show up and not necessarily protect her because she's capable of doing that on her own,
Totally.
but she's giving me the permission to feel safe myself. And that is often, I think, the number one, with every toxically masculine, straight
Yeah.
guy, gay guy, whatever, doesn't matter.
Yeah.
I have always noticed that when they feel safe, it's a very different story. But when that fear kicks in because they feel like I can't be safe, I can't express myself, I can't do this because if I do, something bad will happen,
Yeah.
then that's when the ego comes out, the rudeness, the
Yes.
asshole behavior, as you put it,
Yes. Yeah.
So like that's kind of my thoughts on it.
Yeah, no, and you're absolutely right. And but we do this as women, we do this like in career. And that's what I love about this work is, I got into all of this because I thought I was going to be a business coach. And here I am having wildly different conversations than I ever in a million years thought I would have in the best way possible, right? But that same thing that you just said was like with men, we don't have a choice, right? Like women, we're biologically wired to allow you to protect and provide, right? Like when you think of how we're biologically wired, you go back to caveman days, right? There was hunters and there was gatherers, right? We were meadow people, y'all were hunters, right? Like that's just kind of the way that it went. So it's like biologically wired in us. I never thought of it from that perspective. Like, yeah, we were just wired to safety. And that's probably why so many men wind up so unhappy because the women in their lives won't let them protect them and they don't have purpose and they get lost and they turn into assholes.
Well, and I think we can even go a step further with that. I
Okay.
don't think it's about that, necessarily as a man. My job isn't to protect somebody. My job is to create the space for you, for others to feel safe. But
Mm,
and there's a difference there because
sure.
everyone can protect themselves. Everyone is capable of being a jerk. Everyone is capable of fighting. Everyone is
Sure.
capable of survival instincts. It doesn't matter your gender. Sure, men traditionally being, physically more, stronger and things like that can do
Yeah.
a better job against other men.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I mean, women don't fight fair either,
Yeah,
So like,
and I was thinking more like caveman days of like,
yeah,
you
and
were
that's what
gonna
I'm
go
talking
kill the
about.
tiger and I'm going to versus
Yeah.
the way it looks now. I do agree that it's more hell, women are probably more of a threat to your safety than men nowadays.
I don't disagree that women should definitely be taken seriously. Absolutely. And so I think going back to those
Yeah,
cavemen
yeah,
days of that tribalism mentality,
yeah,
we human history has always, deferred to our strengths and what we can do. I mean, it's our brain. The reason we're top of the, food chain is because we can adapt. We've learned how to build and make tools. We see a problem, we know how to
yeah,
go around it.
yeah,
And men, especially
yeah,
giving that they were the
totally.
ones that went out, are even
Yep,
more so.
yep,
Women had to solve different kinds of problems back at base, for lack of a better term,
100%.
than
Yeah,
men did out in the field. And so that's why, as a man, I can't turn off, and I think a
yeah,
lot of men will resonate with this.
yeah,
I can't turn off scanning my environment and
exactly.
not being somewhat aware of who is around me. And I
Yeah,
think, that's probably not unique to men, but we have a little bit, I think, of an evolutionary advantage on that. But it comes out in another way in that when we are around people who we don't have to necessarily do that with, we don't know how to
yeah,
turn it off. And
right.
so we're like always looking for threats, which means, you're always perceiving what somebody's doing. Let's say you and I were, engaging and you said something that upset me in some way. My masculine energy is immediately going to go, whoa, I need to protect against that. That made me uncomfortable. That upset me in some way. But then that's also where I've had to do the work to go, ooh, but why did that upset you?
Yes,
What's really going on? What did you just tell yourself? Let's say you said, I don't like the way your shirt looks today. And
right,
I heard you're ugly,
right.
And so like you didn't say that. You just said, I don't like
No,
the way your shirt looks today in this scenario. But I took it a certain way. And so then my insecurity kicks in, right? And so many, I think, men, because we have never been taught how to deal with our insecurity,
yeah,
whereas I think women kind of have to.
Yes.
because,
Because
you
we're
know,
insecure as fuck from go.
and then you're around other women who pick at those, right? And men don't tend to
Oh,
do
there
that
is
as
so
much.
much more girl on girl crime. Like, yes, there's nothing. I'm way more worried that a woman's going to tell me I look like shit than a dude, for sure.
But with men, we have a different kind of issue where, you know, our insecurity looks like not being good enough.
Yeah,
They're both I'm not good enough, right?
of course.
But
Yeah.
our I'm not good enough is to
Yep.
provide, to
Yep.
create, to
Let me prove
protect.
to
It's
you
always
how
an
I am good enough.
action.
Yep.
We're never saying I'm not good enough to just exist.
Yeah, we don't, but women don't either. Again, but we're wired. So like we are wired. So I don't know how much of this like Alison Armstrong is a woman who I have followed who talks a lot about the difference. She's studied men. She wrote Keys to the Kingdom and The Queen's Code, which are two most incredible books about men and women and understanding men more than anything. But she talks a lot about our human instinct versus human spirit, right? Like there's the animal instinct, right? The human animal instinct, like you said, is to scan for threats. And so the difference for a woman is she's scanning for threat, but she's also dependent on you because if something bigger comes, like you're bigger, you're stronger, you went first. So I'm scanning for threat and I have to trust you, which also but also women have a diffused awareness, whereas men don't. So I'm hearing you describe this in totally different words and it's just really resonating. And this is so fascinating. But I want to go back to what you said about getting defensive, because that's a big thing. And again, we can do this in business. We can do this in our relationships, right? When we feel like we are being threatened or being told that we're doing something wrong, right? Our human instinct is to defend our stance, defend ourselves. What are your thoughts on that? Like, because women do it too, right? But it is masculine energy traits, right? To defend my stance, to defend my honor, to defend my family, whatever the fuck I'm defending, right? It is a defensiveness. But you guys are wired for it more than we are. Why?
I think it's because we sit in that masculine energy, and I think it's important to go back to kind of how I view the two.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Masculine energy asks you what's next.
Okay.
Feminine energy asks you what's here.
I
And
like that.
so you need both,
Of
really.
course.
And men kind of do experience the what's here, but we immediately move into the what's next. It's what's here, threat. What's next? Attack or
Yeah.
defend or just
Yeah.
act. Because if you don't act quickly, you or your loved one's lives can be in
Sure.
danger. And that's not a conscious thought we're having. It's just the subconscious wiring that we all kind of have learned. And I think so I think that men naturally just kind of go into that what's next, where you say something that upsets me and the insecurity kicks up. I don't ask what's here. If I typically, I mean, I do,
Yeah.
but not every guy asks what's here.
Sure.
We immediately go, well, what's next? How do I want to respond to that? What did she mean? What did he mean? It immediately goes into this mindset of, I need to protect what you just told me because something internal to me is now at risk. It can be my identity, it can be my worth, it can be my self-respect. If any of those are threatened, men immediately move into that what's next
Yeah.
mentality.
Yeah. That's so interesting. So where the way I describe, I love that I wrote down what you wrote, like what you said, what's next versus what here. For me, I see it like the way I describe masculine, feminine is result versus experience. Right? It's the same thing, right? Like, what's the result we're going towards, right? Versus what is the experience I'm having? What's next? What's now? But I like both of those scenarios. So, you grow up, right, in a somewhat traumatic environment, you do the work, you kind of start to understand this stuff, you wind up in a fraternity and all these different things. When did you learn and how did you learn to invite your feminine energy into the conversation? How did that show up for you?
Well, first I had to kind of retrain my unhealthy masculine energy to
Sure.
do that.
Can
Um,
you give us some examples of what is an unhealthy masculine? Because even as women, many of us tend to live in this. So listen to what he's going to tell you right now. How do you define an unhealthy masculine?
I would define an unhealthy masculine energy as you automatically assume your worth is tied to, as you put it, your result or what's
Yep.
next, instead of what can I, you know, what is the direction I want to go? Um, you know, what what action do I want to take instead of, you know, it's a hard question to ask, honestly, because I'm trying to keep in mind that it doesn't show up for everyone the exact same way,
No, no,
and
no, no. That's okay.
I try to avoid words like toxic and unhealthy because it implies judgment of people.
That's fair.
And so I guess I think the better way I would answer that is
Mhm.
masculine energy that has not experienced health, feminine energy
Yes.
is what unhealthy masculine energy is. And
It's
so
results at all
if you're,
costs. I
it's
don't care
results at
who I
all
hurt.
costs.
I don't care who I
Yes.
have to step on. I don't care who I fuck over. I don't care who I piss off. The result is the
Yes.
result is the result. And if you're not on board for the result, get the fuck out of the way. Tends to be
Yes. And
versus,
so,
again,
yeah,
without any thought to the experience or
right.
what's here, that is what makes it. But then it also is on the flip side from an unhealthy or not productive. And if I'm all in the what's here and what's here and what's here, and I'm never looking at I never look up, right? I crash and burn, right? So it's both
Right.
sides. And so that's how, go ahead.
So I was going to say it's essentially unhealthy when you're lacking the balance of the two.
Yes.
So
Yep.
like if you're only in your masculine energy, there's no such thing as like healthy and unhealthy masculine or
That's,
feminine
thank you.
energy, because it's just
Good point.
energy. It isn't a judgment
Okay.
or a moral thing in
No,
either
you're
way.
right.
But
Game
we
on.
as humans perceive it as unhealthy because somebody's
Right.
lacking the other side. A
Yep.
man who is only in his masculine and doesn't know how to receive and be present comes across as a jerk and only focused out for himself and selfish, narcissistic, egotistical, all the words and descriptors we use. Whereas on the other end, a female who's sitting in her feminine energy, she's,
Usually
a,
bratty. She's a bitch.
there you
She's
go. I
entitled.
was trying to
She's a
find the best
bitch.
word, but
She's bratty. She's like, fuck you and the horse you rode in on. This is, yeah, no,
yeah,
we
if
all,
he don't pay
we
my
all
bills, he's
know.
not worth
Yes.
anything.
Yep. Well, you know,
I have to receive. It
what have
almost
you
comes
done
across
for
as
me
this.
lately? Like all of that.
And
Yep.
so we hear terms like, people who go after money and, just it comes out in all these other ways, right? Of
Sure.
like, well,
Gold diggers and different, yep.
right. She's only in it for,
Right.
herself. To
Right.
hear the similarity though, that I
Yeah.
just said, they're
Yeah.
only in it for themselves. And so it comes from that selfish energy, which we all embody and have. I mean, it's human nature to be selfish, but it's also human nature to see pain and empathy and to have
Yeah.
empathy for others. Those are both true statements. I mean, humans aren't one dimensional. If we were, then psychology wouldn't exist and the world would be a much simpler place.
Amen to that.
And so
Amen to that.
I think with masculine, with seeing the masculine energy, in my fraternity, I noticed guys that, were clearly operating from insecurity, guys who had been bullied and middle school and now had to be kind of alpha male like, right? To see, other guys who, were very quiet and withdrawn to themselves. Just seeing that perspective across the field, it kind of showed me that, masculine energy does come in many different shapes and sizes. And it's not always, I have to achieve or do. I mean, there were plenty of slackers as well.
Totally. Yep.
Those were the guys I would say were sitting more in their feminine energy, but they were lacking some of the masculine energy that they needed. And
Right.
so I think it wasn't until I got out of college,
Yeah.
and I took, even though I studied psychology, my junior year of college, I met my mentor who, he showed me actually what health and masculine energy look like.
I love that.
He also taught me how to code, and how to program. And then I went to have a career in software engineering for, 8 more years after I graduated. I didn't even, stick to the psych and
Yeah.
poli-sci path that I had started on. I got my degrees, but I moved into engineering. And for me, that was actually that was a masculine move. That
Of
wasn't
course.
what I was wanting to really do with my life, but it was what felt safe. It's what felt practical. It's what felt like, oh, I can make my family, or my situation in my past, I can make it okay if I just go be a successful engineer, if I go work for major corporations,
Right.
if I'm a good engineer and I make a lot of money, and I did. I mean, I made so much money, I blew half of it,
Yeah.
So
Totally.
like, it's
Yeah.
like, but because I wasn't ready for those things, but
Sure.
I would push and I would use that
Yeah.
masculine energy to just keep pushing until it broke. And it wasn't until it wasn't until everything broke that I was able to start really discovering what my feminine energy looked like.
Yeah. Isn't that interesting? We always got to fucking break it first.
Can't have a breakthrough until you have a breakdown.
Oh, fair enough. So I want to, something I've really been thinking about this with money. I'm not making any official declaration, but I am in this like total, decenter money. Like a lot of women are trying to decenter men. I'm trying to decenter money right
Okay.
now. But what I heard you say is because a lot of people, I'm holding on to the money thing for a reason. I talk to a lot of people who make a shit ton of money compared to others, right? So shit ton is relative, but make a fair amount of money. We'd be considered a top 10% wage earner in some capacity who have made a ton of money and they don't have anything to show for it. And they have a lot of shame around it. And I just realized lately that the reason why you blow your money when you're chasing money is because it's not actually the money. Right? Like you're waiting for the money. Like for you, you were probably waiting for the money to make you feel like you made it, right? Like Ryan, you did it, right? You came from a shitty lifestyle. You grew up in foster care, all these life circumstances. You made it and you were waiting for it to show up in the paycheck or the house or the career or the accolades. And when it different, you were like,
Checking
well,
the boxes.
yeah. When the boxes didn't, then you started blowing the money because you're like, well, I
I
have all this
wasn't happy.
money. You weren't happy, but you were waiting for the money to make you happy. And so there's a lot of people, a lot of people who probably have never even said that out loud, that they're like, I make more than the majority of the world. And I'm not prepared for retirement or my kid's college or a child getting married. Like there's a lot of people who fear that and they have so much shame around it. But I think it has to do with the fact that we've been chasing money instead of, for you, what you said, like you weren't chasing money. You were chasing accolades, achievement, respect, all those things that you thought having a good job
I
and
was
being
chasing
secure.
not being, trailer park trash anymore. I was
Yes.
chasing being
We're,
upper middle
yeah.
class. And when I
Yes.
got that, I
Yeah.
pretty much pissed it all away
Yeah.
because, I wasn't
Because it didn't
happy.
make
And
you
so
happy.
I went and bought a new vehicle. I went and got
Yeah.
this. I went and got this
Yeah. Of
because I did technically have the money, but I
course.
also didn't have the self-worth that I needed yet
Right.
to hold on to that money. And
Amen.
that's why so many, spiritual and people in the community, they talk so much about, you have to do the internal work before the universe or God or whatever you believe in, or, will bring you the resources that you need because you're
Right.
not ready for them. And the truth is, they're always right there in front of you.
Of
You
course.
just don't see them
Yeah.
because you're not in that energy yet.
Amen. Amen. So good. Thank you for tying that together. That worked out beautifully, like it always does. Well, and I think this is just such a cool conversation because we all like to think that we're special. And I don't mean that in like that we are special, right? We are all our own individuation of God source the universe. So we are special, but we always think that our circumstances are different, right? Like nobody gets me. Like I'm sure you had that moment where like, these guys, you
Still
coming
do
up with your,
sometimes.
yeah, where you're like, well, you didn't grow up in a fucking trailer park. Your mom didn't die when you were a kid and get raised in like you, like, just like for me, I'm like, at the time, I remember when there were women, when I was starting my journey and my kids were little and I was getting into entrepreneurship, there were all these women whose husbands were paying the bills, right? While they were trying to get their business off the ground. And oof, that triggered the fuck out of me, right? Like, because I didn't have that option, but I chose a partner who that wasn't the case anyway. I don't know where I was going with this. I just got on my high horse for a hot minute and
Well,
it took me a stage
if I
left.
may,
Yes.
if I may here, for me, that has manifested actually since the moment I kind of was on my own, because really since my mom passed, but really since I was 18, I've
Yeah.
never had a backup.
Right.
I
Yeah.
don't have while many people say I would never move back in with my parents, I would never ask them to do this or whatever, most people always have the option that if they were about to be homeless and
Right.
without everything,
They have
they
somebody
can
they
make a
can call.
survival decision to
Right.
put their own ego aside and their own pride aside and go, you know what? I will temporarily move back in with my parents so I can get back on my feet.
Yeah.
I don't have that safety net. And
Yeah.
a lot of people don't, who have lost their family and things like that. But for me, that to me is what made it so hard. That's what made it feel like I
Yeah.
had to stay in this masculine
Of
energy for
course.
so long, because nobody was ever going to give to me. No one was ever going to bring things in, because who's there to do that? Who cares enough about me like that
Right.
to actually bring something in? And the truth was, I had to care about me like that.
Amen.
And it wasn't until I started doing that work in therapy and I got out of college and I was on this path of like making a lot of money, and I was changing jobs pretty much every year or every 2 years, but I was always upgrading, right? I was always going to the next one,
Me too.
until I made like the most money. And then I was like, why am I so unhappy? Why doesn't this feel like enough to me? And it was because I wasn't feeling like I
Yeah.
was chasing rather than attracting,
Right.
which is a very different kind of energy you have to be in. And so as I continue to go on the therapy journey, and I'm realizing that a lot of my trauma and a lot of the mind negative beliefs I had about myself, those were what was holding me back. And so
Of course.
I went to EMDR therapy,
Ooh, yeah.
which, for those who don't know, EMDR therapy is basically where they take a finger of light and they go back and forth, and you watch it, and you and your therapist, essentially sit down and talk about your memories and what stands out, and you have to not judge yourself a lot, and that requires that's all. Some people get stuck right there, right? They just start judging and they can never really break out of that. But for me, as I'm going through these memories, she's identifying like the negative core beliefs behind them, right?
Yeah.
And then it uses bilateral stimulation is what it is. And And what it does is it starts to basically allow you to reprocess your memories the way that you do in REM sleep when you're sleeping. It's the same exact behavior. And I'm oversimplifying, and I'm sure psychologists
Yeah.
would be like, there's more to it.
Yeah.
And there definitely is. But
Of course.
simply put, that is what I experienced on the
Yeah.
receiving end of it. And I did that for 2 to 3 years before I really was like, okay, I think all the memories aren't really traumatic anymore. They're just kind
Right.
of there. They
Right.
exist. I know where my responsibility was. I know where their responsibility was.
Right.
And I believe that. And then there was a moment where my therapist was like, I was coming in, I was like, why does my nervous system still react this way though? Like, why do I still feel nervous when I'm going to be seen? Why do I still feel nervous when somebody like, does misunderstands me? Why do I feel that? I know that it has nothing to do with me. I know these things about myself. I can feel those things within me, but the nervous system's still reacting. She was like, it's because your nervous system has been trained for so long to react this way that it's just the neural pathways just go that way. And so you have to consciously, so I learned breathing techniques,
Yep.
I learned meditation,
Yep.
and I started doing all these spiritual practices, for lack of a better term. And those actually are what helped me get out of that masculine energy, move into the feminine energy. And I unlocked a side of myself I didn't even remember existed.
Yeah.
When I was a kid, I mentioned how I like to draw architecture, but I also loved Legos. I liked writing. I liked building story. I used to go out by myself, sometimes with a friend, to the woods, and I would pretend we were in another world, and I was the one crafting the story, and my friends just along for the journey. Like,
Yeah.
yeah, this is fun. We're playing pretend is their mindset. And I'm over here like, I'm the architect of this world,
Yes.
And so, realizing that about myself and realizing, oh, wait, I'm a writer. I'm a bard. I like to tell stories. It's what I
Yeah.
enjoy doing. I like to color. So like just discovering all these things as a kid that I had just lost because they do require you to kind of sit in a more feminine energy
Of
because you're
course.
just existing. You're not trying to,
Right.
there's not an outcome.
Right.
You're not painting to create a painting. You're painting because it's fun. You're not writing to create a book. You're writing because you have something to say.
Yes. So good. I think that's so beautiful because I talk so much about nervous system regulation and, there's some people that struggle, not struggle, but there's some people in the manifestation and spiritual world is like, you make your own rules, blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, I do agree with that 110%, right? But if the physical vessel that you live in right now, its nervous system is shot, you can't make the choice, right? There is no space between stimulus and response, right? The Viktor Frankl quote, right? That, between stimulus and response, there lies a space. And in that space is where freedom lives, right? You the freedom to choose. Do I react as an angry asshole or do I react from, compassion? That exists in every single moment. And if you don't have the awareness to find that space to make the choice, you're always going to react. And so I know again that we make our own limitations, but for most high achievers, men and women alike, if you can't find that space, you don't choose. You react every time, right? It will take over, right? The human instinct will surpass the human spirit that says, I don't want to be an asshole right now. I don't want to be defensive right now. I don't want to have to defend myself or prove that I'm right or whatever in this moment. And so I'm a huge believer in nervous system regulation. And
Yeah, and for me, like learning to regulate my nervous system, it actually required me to first do one thing, and that was to detach my identity from me. Those aren't the same thing, right? And so a lot of people they sit, and I think many people will struggle to even understand what I meant by that. So I'm going
right.
to dive a little bit into
Yeah,
that. Is
please.
my identity is I am Ryan. I
Yeah.
have these things in my life.
Yep.
I have these people I love, right? So that's my identity. But that's not the part of me that is talking to you right now. That's not the part of me that is deciding consciously how to respond, how
Yes.
to react,
Right.
how to show up. I'm letting it flow, right? Like I'm personally letting it flow so it comes across more authentic, but many people move into like performance mode, right? And so like that's not the exact same thing. That's a start. If you need to perform before you can be present, then
Amen.
that's okay as long as the goal is still to learn how to be present. And so I think the nervous system regulation came with learning how to create that space for myself by separating the identity and going, I am the being reacting to my life. My
Yeah.
life is happening with or without me.
Yep.
But if I'm not consciously aware of how I'm responding, how I make people feel, where I'm going, what I'm doing, then it's going to happen anyway. I'm going to my nervous system, my brain, my neural pathways, all
Subconscious.
of that are going to just take
Yep.
action, right? I'm not
Yep.
even thinking about that. And so once I realized that, then it was like, okay, well, if that's the case, maybe I just need to learn to breathe more. And breath is such a powerful force. And I know it sounds ridiculous because for so long I would resist. I'd be like, what's breathing going to do? Well, I don't care. Like, I'm not going to stop and breathe. And when you start doing that, I just want you to go, just a quick double breath, like just like a quick inhale and then another quick inhale and then just let it out. Because that right there, it flips your nervous system very quickly. And then
Yeah.
if that's not working, you kind of dive deeper into deeper breaths. So you've got the breath of life, which is 7 seconds in, hold for 5, hold for 6. I looked that
6.
up,
Yeah, for
but
4.
I think it's 4, count for 4, hold for 4. Anyway, it's like 7, 4, 5, I think. Yeah. So 7, 4, 5. Breathe in for 7, hold for 4, release for 5, and do that at least 3 times. Box breathing, that helps with
Love it.
anxiety and
Yeah.
panic. You've heard the 5, meditation, that's awareness. We so often get caught up in where we're going or where we've been that we forget where we are.
Amen. Yeah.
And
Breath work has changed my life. I swear, like, if anybody's like, what's the one tool? It's been breath work, and both types of breath work, right? Like the in the moment, I'm panicked breath work, but like deep, long, like release breath work, like the whole idea of like the body keeps score, right? All that trauma you haven't processed is in there, especially for us as women, like especially it's all in there. And so there's really there's a guy on YouTube. I tell everybody about him. Breathe with Sandy is his channel. And he has everything from 5-minute like heart coherence to nervous system reset to like 90-minute shamanic deep release, like wild stuff. And so I've done a lot of that I think I have processed. I don't have big T trauma in the way that you do, but I have the same little T trauma the rest of us do, right? Like remember the
yeah,
first time we were rejected, the first time we were told we weren't good enough, right? The first time we were told we were ugly, the first time we were told we were too much, right? Like all of that, right? The first time we learned that, oh, it's not safe to speak my mind here. I processed through some of that in EMDR, which is really interesting. Um, all of that to say, like, it is so, like, I'm a huge believer, and it took me an embarrassingly long time to commit to a breathwork practice for a lot of the reasons you said. It was just like, you can't measure it. There's no scorecard. Nobody tells me if I'm doing it right or wrong. And it was really, but it was 11/11/24. I downloaded the Wim Hof app and was like, something's gotta fucking give, right? Like, I am sick and tired of this shit. Like, I was in these cycles where I would have these, like, life would be amazing, and then shit would fall apart. I was still heavily in my money bullshit that time. And I downloaded that app, and then I told somebody else to do it, and they were like, "That's really aggressive." And I was like, "Okay, let me find something gentler." And I have probably done breath work 90% of the days since 11/11/24. And I swear to you, it's changed my life.
I think for that's almost exactly what I experienced myself, just slightly different. I had to make intentional effort for breath work myself, but if I were to go back and do it again, I would actually just teach myself the double breath. Because
Really?
that alone, yes, because one, I have ADHD, right? And so sitting down for a few minutes and trying to force yourself to breathe just sounds like the most boring thing you can do. But a quick double breath a few times, you can do that anywhere, anytime, anyway, right? And so learning to start there, it teaches you how to start taking that intentional time for your
Sure.
breath
Yeah.
without committing to, I got to sit down for 5 minutes or I got to sit down for
Yeah.
2 minutes even
Yeah.
and do this, which is often the hardest part. And then the other half of it was believing that I deserved to be calm. I deserved to be regulated. I
Sure.
didn't have to continue to act in this chaotic energy
Right.
of just reacting to everything.
Right.
And until I accepted that I was allowed to slow down and allowed to breathe, because who is around me telling me I can't breathe? If anyone's
Right.
telling you you're not allowed to take time to breathe, get away from that person because
Right.
they're not having your best interest in mind. We are
Right.
our best selves when we breathe. We are, I think, what is the first thing we do when we come into this world?
Breathe.
We
Take a
take
deep
a
breath.
breath.
Yeah.
Yes. And if we don't, that's the problem, So like, why does that change just because we're adults? It doesn't. It
It
actually is even
doesn't.
more important because now we
Right.
have rationale and history and all these things on top of it. Whereas when we're babies, we just have a few basic needs and that's it
Right. Yeah.
until we get older.
Right.
So
Uh,
I think the point being is that,
yeah.
for a lot of people, I think breathing is a hard thing to start doing intentionally because they're afraid that they don't have time or they can't, there's some excuse, right?
For me, it just felt insignificant. Like, it wasn't that I didn't have the time because I could sit and scroll on social media for God knows how long. So I had plenty of fucking time, right? It was to me, I didn't see the significance. Like, to me, it felt like it was almost like so simple that I couldn't. Like, I could not possibly wrap my head around that something as simple as breathing could solve what I felt were such monumental problems that I just wouldn't do it. It wasn't that I couldn't or I didn't have the time. It just felt too fucking easy.
Yeah, when you're sitting in that like deregulated nervous system, right? Like everything's antsy. You're kind of like you're always kind of scanning, you're always doing, there's always like reason why you can't slow down. And even if that means just mindlessly scrolling, like, right, you're still in that anxious energy. You're
100%.
just getting dopamine and a few other chemicals to help you feel a little bit better about it, which is fine. I mean, it's better than blowing up, right? Coping tools are coping tools. The key is to always find the healthiest one for you.
Amen.
You know, I try not to judge people for their way that they cope.
That's
And
fair.
so for me, learning how important it is to regulate your nervous system, it opens up so many more ways to think, right? So like you can make better decisions, you can choose things more intentionally, you can and many people they find these things through religion. So religion taps into these things. And I don't want to go too down that path, but it does tap into these. When you pray, you
Maybe
are
we need to have a part 2 because I really
maybe
want to hear your
when
perspective
you
as
pray,
religion.
you are meditating. When
Yeah.
and you see it all the time. People do intentionally breathe all the time. They just don't think about it that way because they're being told to breathe rather than telling themselves that they can.
I mean, it's the first thing we do to a child, right? When a child comes up to you upset and crying inconsolably, what's the first thing you do? You say, breathe, baby. Take a deep
Yeah,
breath.
you breathe and you breathe with them.
Yeah. And then you basically co-regulate them until they can communicate with you about what's happening. But we can actually do that. And that's the beauty of Derek in my life. Like, it's kind of a joke now. And we both are very intentional about not creating codependence because we very easily could. Like, Derek and I could very easily become codependent because of the way we support each other in that way, but we very intentionally make sure to not do that in an unhealthy way, right? Like you said, codependent in the coherence of partnerships is good, right? Codependent in I can't live without you.
Interdependence is what you're describing.
Interdependent. Thank you. Interdependence. We are very interdependent, but he literally can co-regulates me, and I don't know he's doing it like. And then I'm like, oh, everything's fine, and he's like, yeah, you're welcome. Fuck. But
It's funny
now,
you say that.
yeah, yeah, go ahead.
I was gonna say, sorry. It's funny you say that. Like right before this,
Yeah,
I had to go to my partner, and I went up to them and I said, "Can I have a hug?" And we just breathed for a second because I
yeah,
was just nervous, you know.
yeah,
And so,
totally.
and I was nervous because my masculine energy started coming out and going, oh, we need an outcome. You got to do well. It's got to be
Yeah,
perfect. All this stuff
yeah,
started racing. I was
yeah,
like, no, 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 no. Breathe, slow down. It's
yeah,
just a conversation.
yeah,
And so you're right. Like having your partner there or someone in your life, a support system of some sort who can help you co-regulate will get you so far until you can learn to kind of do that on your own.
yeah. Well, so my daughter, she's 6 and diagnosed with ADHD, which I have a lot of thoughts around, but more than anything, I got the diagnosis just to to better understand how to give her support systems and tools because it's very different than my son's support systems and tools because he is neurotypical in that way. But I now can because he co-regulate. I know how to co-regulate her. And like, I'll give you a perfect example. She's throwing a fit. She's at football practice and she thinks we're walking away. We were going to go for a walk. And all of a sudden she decided she didn't want us to leave. And she like sits down, tantrum, full on in the middle of practice. And again, the common reaction is to react, get up, don't do that. Stop it. And I was just like, and it all of that went through me. And I just literally got down on my knees and I was like, come here. And I just gave her a hug. And it took us probably 90 seconds. And then I was like, are you okay? And she's like, yeah. And I said, can I go for a walk? And she said, yeah. And that was it. Like all she needed. And so now, like, I know when she goes up, it's just she needs me to regulate her. And as soon as I get her regulated, but it's a lot of work to not go up with a child and her displays are loud because her mama's displays are loud and Derek's displays are loud and her father's displays are, I mean, poor kid, like, God bless her. But it is that co-regulation. And he does that a lot for me, but I do it for him as well. Like, when I disappear, like I don't travel as much for work as he does, but when I disappear for a few days and I come back and he's like, oh God, I'm glad you're here. Like, you're just like, I need you to hold me down. Like, just the balloon can fly. I just need you to it's like a parachute, or a kite. Like, I just need my grounding. Like but we both do it, which is so cool, right? We both get to fly, we just have somebody who grounds us, which is pretty cool.
Yeah, exactly. There's especially like you're doing this for your kids, which is amazing.
Yeah.
And many old school parenting methods would say like, no, you shouldn't do that, right? But the truth is like if it worked for you, you would know how to do that now, and you don't, right?
Ugh,
Like the people who were raised without that, who were raised to suck up their feelings and pull
right.
yourself up by your bootstraps and your
Yeah.
feelings don't matter and all this stuff. And
Yeah.
it's like, yeah, but I see how you act. I see how you're
Yeah.
responding. Feelings do matter. They matter actually so much for humans.
Right.
And
Right.
I've heard you say this. They are sensory input. They are
Yeah.
telling you something is off. They are telling
Yes.
you something is wrong. And when you're a child, you don't know how to express that. You don't know what that
Of
means.
course
You don't know
not.
what's going on. And so it is your parents' job to show you, to try to show you at least. And you don't have to be perfect at it, but trying is
Gosh,
better than
amen.
not trying.
Amen.
And with that, like, you're honestly teaching her how to be a healthier adult that way,
100%.
because
I
I
believe that.
guarantee you a few years from now, she's going to know how to do that herself. And
Oh,
she's
yeah.
probably already learning. I don't know how old she
She is.
is, but
She's 6. No,
yeah,
she's smart as shit. She's 6 and neurodivergent, like, it was almost 7, 6.5. So it's wild. All right, I could talk to you for days. I'm gonna
yeah.
cut us off. Like, maybe we have a part
Let's
2 because I
circle
just really
back.
enjoy this conversation. Because, but I and that's another reason why I do love these, and I was so glad, Ryan, that you reached out, because I was like, at first glance, I was like, I don't know what the topic is, but I think there's always value in this and in other people's perspectives and discussions and ideas and ideologies. And even like you have way more of a therapy background than I do, right? So to hear some of those words that ring true with people, I'm not anti-therapy. I think that there is good therapy and think therapy, but like anything in life, right? Like when used as a tool versus as a solution, give us two different things. And I think a lot of people want to use therapy as the solution. And it's exactly like you started this conversation. Therapy is a tool. The real work is done in the moment, right? In sitting down, in studying my reactions to things, right? In owning my own shit. And whether that is in breathwork, meditation, journaling, therapy, a conversation with God, source, the universe, whatever the fuck that looks like, but it is in the in between. And we live in a world that, like you said, glamorizes the doing. What did you do today, Ryan? Like versus, I actually took some time to figure out why the fuck I keep, I have these repeating patterns in my life that I don't like. And I spent some time working on that, right? Like that's not
Notice
Instagram
what you
worthy.
just said, though. You said
What?
the word work.
Mm,
You said the word work, and that's actually something I came to a realization of just a few days ago. I'm a Capricorn Earth sign energy, right? And so I'm always like, I love work, right? And
yeah,
I've had to rephrase that for
right.
myself recently. And so what I've started doing is when people ask me like, what are you working on? What are you doing? I'm working on my goals. I'm working on
Yes.
myself. I'm working
Yes.
on my relationships. I'm
Yep.
working. You're always working. We're built to work. Humans are built
Amen.
to work as a
Amen.
concept. Like we're not necessarily built to have a certain job or to
Right.
to engage in a system a certain
Right.
way, but we are built to do things. I mean, how boring is life if you just sit in your room all day
Exactly.
doing nothing and you're not depressed, you know?
Yes. Right.
Like that
Yeah.
nobody does that unless they're kind of not feeling their best selves. And so I think work is always something that we're doing. The question
Yeah.
is what are you working on? Because you could
Amen.
be working on a result, yes,
Yes.
but you can also just be working on yourself, on your feelings, on your
Yeah.
relationships, on how you view yourself. I mean, there's all
Yes.
kinds of ways it can manifest.
No, I think it's beautiful. I had a client and a friend just send me this thing in the mail. She had a nice little card and this piece of paper where she's like, all the Ryanisms, like in coaching calls, like I write down the things you say, and she wrote them all on a piece of paper for me and mailed them to me. And it was so beautiful. But one of them was that, you know, the inner work is just as much work as the work,
Yeah,
right?
it's
Like
more
the inner
important
work.
and honestly,
I agree with that wholeheartedly, and that was the big shift I had in 2025 was my morning walk and breath work and journal was just as much of a priority as whatever the business needed from me that day. And I finally found that balance that we were talking about. I don't know if I love the word balance, right? But that harmony. Let's use the word harmony. Let's use a feminine energy word, right? Like I found the harmony between all right, the amount of time I spend working on me, working on my soul, connecting with God, source, the universe, right? Being aware of my habits and my patterns, and then the harmony of that combined with the doing of the work, right? The creating of the content, the coaching of the clients, the recording of the podcast, and all of that. But seeing them both as equal priority, I think was probably one of the most transformational things I did in 2025 was really like
spot
they are
on.
both important, right? Like they're both this is as much of a priority, right? Like I wouldn't blow off a client meeting, right? Why would I blow off that meeting with myself and whatever that meeting looks like with myself, right? It could be a workout, it could be going for a walk, it could be a journal session, it could be EMDR. Like there's a million ways, right? Like it could be sitting down with a coloring book, it could be having a cup of coffee. I would say though, the one thing I will encourage, obviously, like Ryan said, no judgment, but like do it alone. Like I do think we tend to be like, well, I'm working on myself because I went to coffee with my friends. But I don't know about you, but coffee with my friends, well, is very entertaining and a lot of fun. It's not always productive.
Yeah, that's more of an energy refill, a refill of
Yeah,
your energy because you're
sure.
around people who kind of help fill your
Right.
energy back
Yeah,
up
yeah, yeah.
than it is really working on yourself. You're absolutely right.
Yep.
Like I spent
Yeah.
that, I mean, that's probably the one thing I didn't mention is how much alone time I spent with myself during
Amen.
all this. I mean, I've had groups of friends come and go. I've had best friends for a long time I've had to kind of say goodbye to
Mhm.
recently. And a lot of that is just because I just done all this like this self-reflection on who I am, what do I want, where am I going, and who's influencing me, and where's that coming from? And it wasn't clear. I couldn't hear my own voice until I was by myself. Right. And so, like, you can't hear your own voice. And it's really uncomfortable because a lot of people struggle with silence. They struggle
Yep.
with alone time.
Yep.
And that is exactly why you need it. You need that alone time because you need to be able to slow down and listen to yourself. You can start with, like, I don't know, reading a book or coloring or doing an
Totally.
activity, of course. But while you're doing that, you're going to hear thoughts kind of just pop into your head. You're going to start in thinking of something randomly. You're going to hear a random lyric in your head. However it comes up for you, it doesn't
Yeah.
matter. But those are the signals. Those are your subconscious brain trying to tell you something.
Amen.
And you can't hear the subconscious side unless you silence the conscious. And you're
Yeah.
not going to do that while you're talking to somebody
Amen.
or around
Or
someone even.
or scrolling social media. You're probably not
Definitely
going to
not
find
then.
it.
No, that's just going to make you hear what you want to hear.
Right. Or piss you off when you don't. No,
I do
and
want to say like one thing
yeah,
that I think is really important to the whole
yeah,
masculine feminine energy thing here
yes.
is
And we're gonna close with
masculine
this. So it's gotta be
masculine
really good, Ryan.
energy.
Just teasing.
Thanks. No pressure. I would say in my journey, masculine energy helped me feel safe.
Yeah.
Feminine energy helped me feel alive.
Yes.
And the two together create a harmony that
Mm.
allow me to show up in nearly every moment with my best self. And that doesn't mean I don't have bad days. That doesn't mean I am not struggling in other ways. But it wasn't until I learned how to create the safety of masculine energy and how to accept and allow in the feminine energy to help me feel alive. Because feminine energy says, this is what fuels you. This is what you love. This is what
The
brings you life.
experience.
And so many men couldn't even tell you what brings them life. You said it earlier. They put their purpose in protecting. They put their
Yep.
purpose in doing, right?
Yep.
And so for men, I would say, start thinking about what do you love? That's why so many men, they get those little hobbies, right? And they go for those. They love that stuff because they're trying to sit more in that feminine energy. Even if they don't word it that way, they are trying to sit into what makes them feel alive.
Oh gosh. Okay. I think there's going to be a part two because we could go on for days. So Ryan, if people want to connect with you, follow you on social, all of the things, where can people connect with Ryan in some way? Where can they connect with you?
The best way is probably just on my TikTok. It's Ryan encoded, RYANENCODED.
And I'll make sure to put that in the show notes as well.
And you can also go to my website, artisandwear.com, if you want to look at any of that stuff.
Yeah, because I think, we didn't even get into that side of it. But that's also why I love these conversations. And maybe this is my own reflection as we end this. I used to always feel the need to tell people's business story for some reason. And I'm going to thank you for not letting me, because I tried to lead you there like several times. And you were like, that's not where we're going today.
It didn't feel like the point of the conversation. The
I
people aren't
know.
people aren't listening because of that. They're listening because of the perspectives. And
I
I
know,
think
but that's
I think
my programming where I'm like, well, we are professionals and it is a big part of who we are. And it's what connected us, right? It was our careers. That's why we both got on TikTok. That's why we both. So thank you for catching that in me and being like, that's not the point of today's conversation. So thank you for pointing that out. I think that's
of
really
course.
beautiful. Ryan, thanks for the time. Thanks for the conversation. Like I said, I would not be shocked if we decided to do a part two at some point in time, because I think we barely
I'd love
scratched
to.
the surface of some cool stuff. So thank you for being here.
Thank you.
Thanks so much for tuning in to the Uncensored Self podcast. If this conversation cracked something open for you, trust that. That's the work. And share this episode with a woman in your life who's ready to stop performing and start creating. And if you haven't already, hit subscribe, leave a review. It helps this message reach the women who need it most. Remember, you're the creator. The rules are yours. And your uncensored self, she already knows what to do. Keep leading, keep listening, keep becoming.